Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes place in the Russian Far East, to a place we have visited before, a primitive and rugged peninsula called Kamchatka, where the geological activity rivals sites from our very own Yellowstone National Park. There are geysers and beautiful mineral water pools here, as this region is part of the Ring of Fire volcanically active area surrounding the Pacific Ocean. As you can see by the satellite view of this area, it is very pristine with forests and beautiful mountains, and very few cities or towns. The elevation of this area is very low at under 1,000 feet in elevation, with the exception of mountains that rise to about 2,500 feet in elevation at their highest. The streams of this area are responsible for just over 25% of the world's salmon population. Dahurian larch and Asian white birch are the predominant trees in this area, with higher elevations giving way to Erman's birch and Mongolian poplar. The lower canopy is crowded with Manchurian alder and Sachalin willow. The beauty of alpine flowers, pink lady slippers, and Arctic daisy flowers belie the dangerous environment surrounding our episode today. In midsummer 2008, the area around the mines at Koryak Geologia mine near Kailino, who sought platinum, were experiencing an oppressively hot summer. When fresh waters are even a few degrees warmer than normal, it tends to hold fewer nutrients as well as less oxygen. It can lead to environmental stresses on migrating salmon populations. It can also lead to lower quality berries and berry yields. These two food sources are very important for brown bears and are the leading factors around our event today. The workers at the mines had noticed a spike in bear sightings around the mines. It isn't too unusual. After all, bears live everywhere around here, but these bears seem desperate and much more dangerous than normal. As the weeks passed, concerns grew into fear, as the bears began to gather in larger groups than anyone believed that they would. The locals had noticed that there were about 30 giant bears that seemed drawn to congregate around the tiny town. The bears that were appearing around town were huge, abnormally large to be so close to civilization. Typically at this time of year, these giant bears would be claiming and defending prime salmon fishing spots along the rivers. But now 1,500-pound brown bears were gathering near the edges of the village in numbers. It wasn't uncommon to see smaller brown bears near town, as the scent of garbage and food lured them in, due to the fact that they couldn't compete with the giant bears claiming prime salmon fishing locations. But now the biggest bears in the area were gathering there. A local pastime which aggravated the circumstance was fish poaching. Because of the poverty-stricken conditions of the local economy, some locals resorted to poaching salmon from the streams, and thereby reducing available fish for the bears. They also sometimes poached the bears as well. The remnants and waste from the poached salmon were frequently discarded in the city, in garbage cans, which are usually near the houses. The scent of their normal food source and the desperation of their conditions were too tempting for the bears, as they were drawn right into town by them. The security guards of the mine were particularly vulnerable to the approach of the bears, as they are posted near mine entrances and only have a small booth for protection. Given their bathrooms were primitive outhouses, each time they felt the call of nature, they would have to risk their lives just to relieve themselves. The increase in bear activity had put everyone on edge, and they were all wary whenever one showed up. As more and more large bears began to filter closer and closer to town, it was only a matter of time before something dramatic occurred. As two of the guards at the mine were tending to their duties, they were unaware of a pack of desperate and starving bears heading in their direction. It isn't exactly clear how the bears got to the men, but a patrol around the mine found their bodies. They were mauled to death, but were uneaten, though gnawed on. The pictures of these men's bodies are horrible, and I cannot post them here, but they are available on my Patreon channel, linked below. But I warn you, they are extremely graphic. You will also find photos of some of the giant dead bears there. After the guards were attacked and killed, the 400 geologists and miners were concerned for their safety. Each time they ventured outside, they had to watch for desperate bears sneaking up on them, or acting aggressively toward them. The bears were seen running through town and even injuring people. The situation became untenable, and they eventually refused to travel to work at the grounds of the mine. When local authorities commissioned sharpshooters to fly in by helicopter to kill and reduce the number of bears in the area, the weather degraded and fog set in, preventing them from doing so. Even so, eventually they did cull several of the most aggressive bears, creating the most dangerous situations. Elders of the village say that once the bears recognize people as a food source, they must be killed. The local attitude toward the plight of the bears is overall negative, especially in the mining community. Experts say there are somewhere between 12,000 and 16,000 brown bears on the Kamchatka Peninsula. They also report that salmonfish poachers have wiped out entire species using nets on rivers to catch them. Officials cite that salmon poachers illegally harvest 100,000 tons of salmon each year, and this affects not only salmon populations, but the health of bear populations as well. In 2008, hunters reportedly harvested 300 brown bears, but estimates climb to 600 bears that have been poached. For the meanwhile, local officials are left with the only short-term solution, which is to kill the bears. But is this a long-term solution? After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think the guards were killed in predatory or territorial attacks? How do you think Russia should resolve the economic crisis, creating the need for locals to poach fish and animals? Is local bear population reduction a viable solution? Or what approach is better? I look forward to reading your comments, so post them below and let's talk about it. Today's episode takes us to a bleak and nearly inhospitable land in northern Siberia, Russia. The village of Keta is on the Taimyr Peninsula, which extends into the Arctic Ocean. The temperatures here range from an average low of -3 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter to an average high temperature in July of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. In winter, there is an average of only 2 hours of daylight, and the elevation is around 1,000 feet above sea level. The land here is tundra, that is sparse and open for the most part. There are small bushes of willow big enough to limit visibility in the lower areas with occasional stands of stunted trees. The predominant animals here are caribou, moose, elk, wild boar, and Siberian musk deer. The common predators are brown bears, wolves, Arctic and red fox, as well as Eurasian lynx. It is in this bleak yet wild setting that our episode takes place. When you think of the Arctic, you probably think of the polar bear as being the predominant predator that could pose a danger, but there is more to the issue than meets the eye. Brown bears are actually very common in the land areas of the Arctic. There is a strange phenomenon that exists between these two bears that makes interbreeding rare and difficult. It ties back into the animal's survival strategy. The polar bear hunts and gets fatter during the winter time, when ice packs form and cover up large spans of open water, leaving only breathing holes for seals and whales to breathe through. This makes for an abundance of food for the polar bears during the winter months, who simply hunt over the breathing holes in the ice. Brown bears, in contrast, fatten up on sedge grasses, the eggs of birds and calves of caribou, plus winter-killed caracasses in the spring. They continue to grow larger while feeding on berries in the brief berry seasons. This means that brown bear and polar bear active seasons, and consequently their breeding seasons are offset from each other. Given both animals prefer different habitats, with polar bears preferring to hunt along the ice edge and brown bears hunting more inland, they don't have a great chance of meeting up for breeding. That is how two different types of bear exist on the same territory, but do not often interbreed. As you can see, in the Arctic, there is a bear species that can threaten human safety, no matter what season it is. September is a very crucial month for brown bears, but then again, every month of the feeding season is. On September 23rd, a 6-year-old boy, whom we will call Ivan, and his twin sister, whom we will call Olga, were playing with other children from their village on a helicopter pad. The pad served as a way outside services, and light-duty goods could be brought into the villagers when other means were not possible. The children were unaware that this year had been difficult for local brown bears, and a huge and hungry one was watching them from the bushes nearby. It wasn't clear if the bear had been brought in by the smells emanating from the city garbage cans, the sounds of the children, or if it was just wandering by and stumbled upon them. Whatever the reason was, it was disastrous for Ivan, his sister, and their village. As the kids ran around and chased each other, the brown bear honed in on Ivan. Perhaps he was the closest one, but for some strange reason Ivan drew the bear's attention. It burst from the nearby bushes and quickly slammed the boy into the ground and began biting and clawing at him. It began dragging him into the bushes as he kicked and screamed for help. Olga had seen the attack, and she and the other children fled as fast as they could, as Ivan futilely struggled against the hungry bear's intentions to kill him and feed on him. It wasn't but a few seconds before Ivan was still and lifeless. Olga ran all the way back to her village, screaming in terror, and quickly alerted adults in the village. An armed response team was rapidly rounded up and began searching for the bear. They scoured the bushes near the area for several hours before finally locating it a short distance away. They fired their rifles, and the upset Ursus lay as still as the snow around him. There is no report I could find in my research on the condition of the bear, but it is logical to say that most brown bears, even hungry ones, do not frequently hunt people. It is fair to assume that it was driven by the need to fatten up to survive winter, but we have no information regarding its weight, age, nor condition. But pictures of the dead bear are posted on my Patreon account, linked below, and they show that the bear appeared to be in good shape. The Russian version of the FBI, called the Russian Investigative Committee, investigated the incident, and it appeared to be a clear-cut case of a predatory attack on a human being with the intent to feed upon them. This is nothing new to people living in remote regions of Russia. One commenter on one of the articles I found in my research stated that they were taught to fire high-powered hunting rifles as children, because the bears frequently came into town and might threaten them or others. Other commenters indicated that as children they would find bear tracks in their boot tracks while walking home from school. One thing is certain: the closer we live to prime bear habitat, the more likely dangerous and even deadly runs in with them will be. They survive in an economy, not based on money but on calories, and each time they spend energy, they are calculating the risks versus the rewards, just like shrewd businessmen with sharp teeth and claws. Knowing this, we must recognize that the most vulnerable targets will be seen as the easiest meal to them. To deny this possibility and reality is pure fantasy, and one that will cost people their lives and the bears as well.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to the Russian Far East. Yes, once again. The rail town of Tinda is known as the capital of Siberia's other great railway, the Baikal-Amur Main Line. It is an important area for transportation of people and goods alike to the remote area. The area around the town is rugged and primitive. The forests here are dense and nearly uninterrupted for miles and miles. The Siberian larch, laurel leaf poplar, and the Scots pine are among the tallest trees here, and kites and kestrels hunt the chi and tufted hairgrasses. The world's most dangerous array of predators are here, with Siberian tigers, massive brown bears, wolves, and Amur leopards. In fact, this area is one of the last bastions of survival for the Siberian tiger and the Amur leopard. A few of the common animals here are mountain sheep, antelope, reindeer, and moose. On May 11, 2015, 54-year-old mother of three, Natalia Pasternak, and her 82-year-old friend, Valentina Gorodetskaya, had spent the day gathering birch sap. Natalia was a postal worker presently, but in her previous career had enjoyed being a baker in the town of Tinda. The sap of the birch tree is used to augment recipes, especially drinks. One very profitable use of birch sap is to use it to make birch syrup, sort of like maple syrup. It can be poured over meat or bread to make pancakes or waffles and is considered a delicacy by some people. It is very expensive in the markets, so it was a good way to make money selling it, or use it for the ladies' personal consumption. They had gathered what they would consider a good day's haul and had enjoyed their time in their favorite spot to harvest it. They had come here together for years, since Natalia's adult kids were little. They had always had a peaceful time surrounded by nature, and today was no different, but their lives were about to change forever. As the women prepared their things for departure, Natalia called her daughter Ekaterina on her cell phone. She told her that they were all done and would soon be on their way back home. Suddenly, Natalia's dog, Gerda, sat up and glared a short distance away. She let out an alarmed bark, then another, then a series of long, howling barks. Natalia had never heard Gerda bark like that before, and knew it must be something important. When she glanced up from Gerda, her vision was filled with a brown blur streaking toward her. She instinctively knew it was a bear and turned and ran. She had covered about 40 yards before realizing she had left Valentina all by herself. Valentina couldn't hear very well and couldn't run, so Natalia turned around and looked back toward her friend. She knew Valentina stood no chance of escaping the bear by herself, especially if she hadn't heard Gerda's barks or otherwise been alerted to the presence of the bear. It might just walk right up behind her and kill her unaware. Natalia glanced over toward the bear. Gerda was keeping it at bay several yards away. The bear was vexed by Gerda and wasn't yet focusing on Natalia nor Valentina. Natalia couldn't help but start yelling for Valentina to warn her about the bear. As she yelled, Gerda thought Natalia wanted her to come to her and began running in her direction. The bear, seeing Gerda running, gave chase, and both of the animals were now heading directly for Natalia. With the bear following Gerda, the two were quickly by Natalia's side. The bear seemed confused on who it should attack, the woman or the dog. Natalia froze in fear, but the bear lunged at her. It bit her first on her legs and began pulling at them, trying to force her to the ground. The only thoughts running through Natalia's mind at this point was that this was how she was going to die. She thought nobody would save them. The bear was tearing at the flesh on her legs, and it caused excruciating pain. Natalia knew she would have to fight back or she would be eaten alive. She desperately grabbed the drill and remembered thinking that if she hit the bear, it would enrage it. The bear would then surely kill her quickly. She thought a rapid death would be better than burdening her children, who would have to take care of her if she were disabled. The bear then backed off a few feet, then rose to its hind legs for a moment. It then went back to all four legs and charged her, clamping its jaws onto her legs. The force of the impact knocked her onto her back. In desperation, Natalia tried to poke the bear in the eye with the drill, but it quickly bit through her arm, paralyzing it and making it useless. The bear then focused its attack on her neck. Natalia began yelling out for God to help her as the bear bit and clawed her. As the bear mauled her, she remembered she had not been to confession and would die before repenting from her sins. Right then, Valentina showed up with a big stick, and she began beating the bear with her fists and praying along with her friend. The bear ended her pugilistic prayer assault with a quick swat to her back, which sent her toppling to the ground. Valentina recognized that she would not be able to save her friend, and as quickly as she could, she fled to find help for Natalia. After swatting Valentina, the bear turned back to Natalia. It bit onto her leg and began dragging her deeper into the forest. As she was dragged along the ground, Natalia desperately grabbed at bushes and branches with her working arm to stop the bear from taking her away. After dragging her a short distance, the bear began to rake up leaves and twigs and paw them over Natalia. She silently wondered to herself if the bear was going to signal other bears to come eat her. As Natalia lay still underneath the dirt and leaves, she noticed it was quiet around her. She wondered if the bear had begun to search for Valentina to kill and bury her too. The bear was walking around and had left Natalia for dead, for food later. Natalia was still conscious and was relieved that the attack had stopped. After a little over an hour, the bear returned to her. It began to lick the congealed blood from her neck. It then began to eat her legs while she was still alive. The pain seared through her body with each mouthful of her flesh the bear chewed from her body. When she reached her working arm over to cover her legs, the bear bit through that arm too. Just after the bear crushed her good arm, she heard rifle shots ring out. The bear disappeared from her view, and she could hear footsteps approaching her. 2 hunters had discovered her and had saved her life. Still terrified, Natalia meekly asked if the bear was dead. The hunters responded affirmatively and helped dig her out from the cache. First responders quickly arrived at the scene of Natalia's attack and were surprised to see she was still alive. The injuries she sustained would have killed anyone, but she had never lost consciousness. They loaded her onto a wheeled stretcher and carefully moved her out of the forest and to the hospital. The medical professionals rushed her into the operating room and pulled the sheet covering her body off. She remembers hearing them comment on how she was bitten and clawed all over her entire body. Natalia was shaking from the shock of the attack, but she was alive. The question was, for how long? She recalled that she was covered with blood, leaves, and mud. They immediately administered sedative drugs, and she faded into unconsciousness as her pain disappeared. The surgeons feverishly worked to suture her wounds and stanch her bleeding, stating that her initial prognosis was bleak. Her injuries were extensive and severe. Natalia was missing scalp and neck tissues, as well as deep bites and gashes on her groin, arms, and legs. Her ear was damaged as well, but she was determined that she would recover from this attack. Her daughter Ekaterina would wheel her outside to enjoy the sunlight during her visits. Due to the mud in her wounds, Natalia had a flare-up of sepsis, but the doctors immediately treated it with antibiotics. Natalia also fought a septic pneumonia while hospitalized from the sand and dust that had infiltrated her lungs and bronchial tubes during the attack. She continually dealt with recovering the ability to move her arms and had decided to wear a wig if she couldn't afford plastic surgery to repair her scalp. Ekaterina was supposed to go with the other two women to gather the birch sap. Natalia shudders at the thought of her daughter being attacked as well. Ekaterina was enrolled in a program to be an obstetrician and only beginning her adult life at 20 years of age. The hunter who shot the bear, Sergei Ivanov, informed Natalia that the bear was a 4-year-old female and only about 5 feet 7 inches in height. The sow weighed about 220 pounds, which is a very low weight for a brown bear. This bear had most likely recently emerged from hibernation and was very hungry. Sergei explained that he was just leaving work when the police called him. They told him that a bear had attacked people, and he grabbed his rifle and hurried to help. Once he and his partner arrived, they found Valentina as she escaped from the attack. She was so shocked she couldn't speak and suffered from minor injuries. The two hunters had walked only about 300 yards when Sergei's partner yelled that he had found a bear. The bear immediately charged the hunters and was quickly dispatched by 4 shots from Sergei's rifle. He made sure to end its terror with a coup de grace fired to the head of the sow. It had been laying down, guarding Natalia. She was found only 6 yards from where the bear fell. In prior weeks, bears had been reported encroaching on city boundaries. One bear was shot a week earlier while walking through a residential area. Another bear had been seen digging up corpses in the graveyard. The local area was apparently not able to provide enough food for bears in order for them to go into town like that. There are reportedly 7,000 brown bears in the Amur region. Since 1997, 9 people have been killed by bears in the Tinda district alone. Natalia made significant and rapid progress in her recovery, surprising the doctors. They reported that she was able to walk within a few weeks after the attack. She worked on recovering her strength, and her mental recovery will likely continue for the rest of her life. Natalia commented that the important thing was that she is alive. She said she was grateful to the doctors and hunters for saving her life. As for Goethe, she came out of the fight with the bear unscathed and eagerly waited for Natalia to return home. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think this attack was territorial or predatory? How do you think a firearm would have changed the outcome of this attack? Do you think bear spray would have prevented this attack? Do you think Natalia should have turned around to help Valentina, or should she have kept running to get help? I will enjoy reading your comments, so please post them below and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.